So I have a sterling silver bracelet I made some time ago, and it was never completed. My plans and my ideas had changed, and so this just went into a box of items that I either haven't completed or have reworked and had plans to rework. So I've had requests to do some inlay work in video. I'm going to put a scribe line inside of where I'm going to remove additional material. This is just a small burnishing tool that I use for doing flush settings. So let's see if I can get to where you can see that. I've scribed this so it's kind of diamond shaped now. And I'm going to enhance that line with some Sharpie marker so it's easier for me to see. What I'm going to use is the jeweler saw to remove this additional material. And I've done a bracelet similar technique, and there is a video on our YouTube channel that shows how to make a silver plated bracelet, solder a silver plated bracelet together where two pieces join in the front to make a cuff bracelet. So if you're interested in learning how I made this bracelet initially, you can search for that video on our channel. Okay, we've got it pretty well sketched out. That line there is going to be where I'm going to saw and remove that additional material to open this up. So I'm using the jeweler saw, and it has to be opened up. I have to get the blade inside that hole that I have right now. So I'm going to loosen this up, take the blade out. I'm going to be sawing in this direction, so I need to insert the blade through the hole, back into the saw, tighten that down, and pull the lever up. Okay, so I'm just going to go around on the inside now, and I'm going to remove that additional material. All right, I'm reaching the last bit of the sawing here. Come all the way around, back to where we started. All right, so now we just have to reverse what we did and open it back up, take the blade out, slide the piece out. All right, so there's the piece that I just cut. That will go into my silver scrap pile, and that's this piece opened up. Now what we're going to do is we're going to fashion a back plate. Before we solder that on, we want to make sure we get all of this filed and cleaned up really nice. Doesn't really matter tremendous amount about getting the inside edges perfect, because it's going to be filled in with inlay, but we do want to make sure that our lines are nice and smooth and even. and the shape is just right. So I'm going to do some filing work. I've dug a piece of scrap out of my bin, and what I'm going to do is solder that onto the back. So you want to make sure that it's completely conformed to the shape of the bracelet itself. As we've talked about many times, and if you've ever watched soldering tutorials, you'll know that solder does not fill gaps. So we need to make this as close as we can. We can do some coaxing. Once things become pliable with the heat, we can do some coaxing with our soldering pick to make sure that's attached completely. But that's pretty good right there. And what we're going to do is sweat solder this on. If you're unfamiliar with sweat soldering, what we're doing is we're going to float some solder on this piece. Then we're going to lay it on the back. We're going to heat everything up. Then the solder will flow from this piece onto the silverware. And everything is going to attach. I think what I'll do too is I'll probably float a little bit of solder on the bracelet itself. So I'm using my brass brush to get this all cleaned up. I'm going to pop these into the pickle momentarily just to make sure everything's clean. And then we'll get some solder on this and we'll put that back plate on. Okay, everything's cleaned up. It's been in the pickle for a couple of minutes. And I put it back in cool water, rinsed it all off, and we're ready to go. I've cut up some small pallions of easy solder. Always cut more than you think you're going to need, just because sometimes little solder minions come along and steal your pieces. They just happen to disappear. Amazing how that happens. So I'm going to get myself all set up here, get a solder pick ready. And we are going to do some sweat soldering. So I'm using an acetylene torch. You can use a butane torch or a plumber's torch. And let's see if I can get this done without bumping the camera or putting my hands in the way. So I'm drying up my flux to start with. Grab myself a tweezer here. Now, I'm just going to turn that off momentarily. I'm going to place some pallions of solder on this little piece of metal. We're not so concerned about getting solder in the center, but we are concerned about getting solder all the way around the edges. And I'm also going to put a few over here on this piece as well. Sometimes things are dry, the little pallions want to jump off. I always just throw a little more flux on there to kind of wet it down again and hold those pieces in place. But this is why you keep your pick handy and your tweezers handy, because things do tend to jump around sometimes. Okay, let's get the torch going again. I'm going to start here. This will melt pretty quickly. It's a very thin and small piece of metal and easy solder. So I'm going to use my pick and I'm going to draw the solder across the piece. I want to get my edges covered. You don't want to linger too long with your heat in any one place. This is 24 gauge sterling, so it will break easily, or excuse me, it will melt easily. So you have to learn some flame control. You see things starting to get where it looks like you might melt something, pull your flame away real quick. Okay? So I've got that on there. I've got a piece of solder that's jumped off. This is going to take just a little bit longer. We have a little heat sink going on using the tweezer holding things in place. And this obviously is a much larger piece of sterling. So we need to heat up the entire piece. Let's see if I can get that back on there. Requires a very steady hand, which is something I don't necessarily have. And let's go back to heating all of this. We're going to get that solder melted and get it spread around on those edges. Sometimes I like to throw a little more flux in there, just so we help reduce any oxides. Oxides and solder do not mix. Solder does not like dirty surfaces. Alright, we're starting to melt. I'm going to brush that solder along the surfaces. Okay. Don't want to let that flame linger too long, or your silverware will get to the temperature where it's going to melt that hard solder. Okay. So, I always like to put a little bit more flux on. I don't know that there's a chance of getting too much flux on there. So, I always like to put a little more on than I think I might need. And I'm going to get that piece evened up on there best I can. There's going to be a little bit of a gap there, but we're going to be able to coax that down with our pick. All right. So things with the bracelet are still relatively hot. Not going to take as long. You don't want to focus your heat on that plate, because that plate, being so thin, will melt on you. Flame control is really important in soldering. You'll melt things. It just happens. But I like to think all of the things I learn in soldering, all of the things that happen in soldering are all part of learning experiences, and teaches you what not to do. Alright, so I'm going to kind of peer up underneath there, see. And what I'm looking for is the shininess, which tells me that the solder is flowing. It's going to take a little time to heat this large piece of silver up. Again, we've got the heat sink going on with the tweezer. I'm just trying to peer up underneath here. Give a little heat to the plate. All right, we've got the bracelet heated up really nice, and we get some heat to the plate. And I'm going to do a little bit of pressing with my pick to ensure that that plate is going down. And it's looking good. I don't like to leave it to chance that it attached itself. So you put a little bit of heat on there and press with your solder pick and make sure your surfaces have joined. Alrighty. It can be very difficult to tell when you're sweat soldering if you've achieved connection, but you kind of learn it over time. You do it enough times. Okay, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to let that sit and cool off for a couple of minutes before I quench and pickle it, because I do not want to create thermal shock, which can separate the pieces. Okay, so I've got it out of the pickle, and unfortunately, just before I put it in the pickle, I inadvertently dropped it on the floor, and I got carpet fibers on it. So I'm going to have to take a little time to clean that up. It falls onto the carpet and then burns the carpet. And unfortunately, in our studio space, we have carpet. So anyhow, I'm going to have to clean that up. But we got the back plate on there. So during the cleanup, we'll do all of that together. I'm going to trim off the excess. Alrighty, I've got that cut off. So now I am filing. Let me bring the camera down. Now I'm filing. Let me change that lighting a little bit. Filing here to blend the back plate with the bracelet section. And again, I'm working with my number 2 file. And you want to make this a seamless look. If your soldering was good, you'll be able to create a seamless look here. You won't see any gap. If you see a gap, you can always stick solder a little bit of solder into the crack and hopefully fill in any gap area. It looks like I have a little bit of a gap area here, but I am going to file some of this back. So we'll see what happens after the filing and then reevaluate if anything else needs to be done as far as soldering goes. So right now, it's just a matter of doing a lot of filing. I try to keep as much of the silver dust as I can, because I like to add that into my inlay material. So I always gather it up and put it in a little cup and save it for when I do inlay. That's valuable material right there, believe it or not. I'm going to show you how to utilize it in your inlay. Give a little added sparkle. Okay. Again, I'm going to try not to get out of the camera view. I'm going to be using some power tools to really fine tune everything. It's just my rough filing right now. Got this little box here of strips, abrasive rolls pack, and I'm using the 400 grit. Pardon me, I take that back. I'm using the 150 grit to start with and moving my way on up to the 400 grit. So you can see it's just some rolls. So I'm going to, this is where I can clean off the melted carpet fibers too. You want to start out with your lowest grit number, because that's the most abrasive one, and then work your way up to the higher grit numbers, and that's really going to start to smooth things out. right, so now I'm going to use the rubber bullet, and I'm going to continue to work my way down, basically working my way into smaller and smaller grits. I got my saw stuck there. And I'm going to start blending, making sure everything is blended so we can get that real seamless look. All right, the bracelet is all cleaned up and it is ready for the inlay to be done. So what we're going to be using here is two things. One is just your basic super glue. It needs to be the liquid, not the gel. And a product called Star Bond Accelerator. It isn't necessary to use the accelerator. It just makes the process faster. So accelerator kind of really says what we need to say there. So what I'm going to use for my inlay material is some crushed up lab created opal. And I think I'm just going to use a mixture. I have that darker color and I have this kind of light green, and I've sifted it out to the more fine stuff and the more coarse stuff, and we're going to start with the coarser stuff, and then you fill in areas with the finer stuff. And then some silver dust that I've been collecting, and we're going to sprinkle that in for some added effect. So I'm doing this over paper dish, paper plate, because we're going to be dropping stuff down there, and you want to catch whatever falls. So we're going to start by putting some super glue into our base and spread that around. And then we're going to start by sprinkling the larger particles in. And I'm going to put some of the darker blue in. You can crush your own stone. You can use genuine stone. You can buy stone already crushed. Just knock a couple of them big particles out. And then we're going to add some more glue. And this is where your accelerator comes in. And this, what it does is it hardens the glue immediately. Okay. So let's see, let's take a look here. Doesn't matter if you overfill it. The bigger problem is underfilling it. You want to overfill it. All right, so I'm going to take some of the finer dust now, and I'm going to sprinkle that in. And I'm going to take some of the silver and sprinkle that on top too. Kind of tap that down. And use my accelerator again, which I need to refill the bottle. And that's going to cause that to dry immediately. I don't know if it translates in the camera or not, but the sparkle is really, really beautiful. Okay, your glue, your accelerator. And you want it overfilled, because what we're going to do is we're going to file down the excess. So as to not have any gaps, you want to overfill. Let's see, let's put a little bit more of the finer stuff on. I'm wearing a glove on the one hand so I don't get any glue or accelerator on my hand. This bottle's just about empty. There it goes. Okay. So that's all in there. Now, if you didn't have the accelerator, you can still do this. It's just you're not going to be able to do the filing right away. So that feels like it's all hard and it's ready to be filed. So what you can do is you can file this by hand. As I always say, I'm more partial to power tools. So I'm going to use my jewel tool and we're going to grind away the excess and we're going to make it flush with the top of it. So this is the jewel tool, and what I have on here right now, if you're unfamiliar with the jewel tool, you can check their website out. They also have a Facebook group. I have a coarse diamond grit on here right now. That's going to cut right through that stone very, very effectively. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start filing down and removing the excess stone. I'm keeping water nearby because it does get hot. The silver becomes hot as you work on it. I really like the jewel tool for this purpose. I use it for other things, but it's really wonderful for this purpose here. So we're starting to work it down. Even all the way across and rotating 180 degrees. Alrighty, so just before it's completely flush, I'm going to change over and put on a different wheel. This coarse diamond one really cuts very, very quickly, but it's not going to give you a lot of shine. So we're going to move on to, let's see what we're going to go with next. We're going to go with fine diamond. And I'm going to use a little bit of water this time. Starting to come in. You can see the silvery dust in there. I'm going to change my wheel again. I'm going to go down to very fine diamond. Keep inspecting. This lighting is not the best to show this up on camera. excess glue off of there. Now that I've got it ground down smooth and level with the surface of the silverware, I'm going to start buffing it using white compound on the bench. And this is where it really starts coming to life. The silverware and the inlay itself. Get a little bit of glue residue here. Just kind of scrape that off. And you can see why I really wasn't concerned about the pattern on there, because by the time I'm done buffing it all, I'm removing the pattern anyhow. So I'm just going to keep buffing and inspecting and making sure I'm happy with the finish. Yeah, we're really starting to look beautiful here. So, I'm going to move over and do polishing on the red wheel, and I'll be back to show you what we've got. All right, I wanted to show this to you out in the sun and how absolutely beautiful that inlay is. If you have any questions, be sure to post them and I'll be happy to answer them. We'll talk to you again soon.